Okay, so you guys already have exposure to what we're trying to achieve here. Why is this so dim? There we go. So you already know like what the app is trying to do, right? We had an example solution. So if I comment out the file we're supposed to be working with, index.js, we reload. I only have a couple of chores in here, but the basic functionality is to be able to load in all the chores to see them, to be able to make a new one. Hello world. So it creates a new one, to be able to delete a thing, and then if we have time to also be able to edit this thing and have it persist to the database. We are running the database here, so these are in sync to what we see over here. So let's keep this up for now, because this shows us kind of like what the app is supposed to look like. And then we'll be working in this file, but I'll make it so that it's our index.js file. No, not Slack. Go away. Hang on. Okay, so if I refresh, all the stuff is gone. We're supposed to recreate the functionality that we just saw. So, since we're working in index.js, why don't we like outline the features that we're trying to go for? So like think of it in terms of CRUD actions. What are we trying to accomplish? Create a new thing. Okay. What else? Okay, delete a thing. Yes, that one's important. Read all of the things we have. And I'm being generic on purpose here because you can apply this to any database. And update a chore's priority because we're just focusing on one particular piece there. All right, so what is the first thing that we usually do in our index.js file to make sure everything's on the page? All right. All right. So we'll be putting like all of our code in here. I like to put this part way down so I don't accidentally delete it or something. It's been a long day, guys. All right. So I usually like to make sure that this part is working. So hitting DOM loaded. And just like make sure that we see something. So now we have our basic setup. And if we're trying to accomplish these 4 things, and we're doing functional, what do you think we should do? What's like a good setup if we're accomplishing these 4 different things? So what's like a good setup for what I'm going to put in here if we know we're trying to accomplish 4 things? We can put 4 things in here. Exactly. My point is like being more generic, but like make them into 4 functions. Since we're trying to do 4 different things, break them up into 4 different functions. So for each thing, we can hit that function. So we can have a function for fetch chores. We can have a function for create a chore. We can have a function for delete a chore. And we can have a function for update. So that's kind of the basic setup. What do you think is the most appropriate one to start with? Yeah. So before we can see anything else, we want to make sure everything's on the page, right? So how should I tackle this one? Okay. And where are we fetching from? Yeah, so we're fetching from here. So what do I do next?
Copy paste.
In here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then? So when I do .thens, I usually like to console log to make sure this result is being fed through here and just like what it looks like. Because you might have to do a lot of .thens and you want to see what your data looks like along the way. So is everyone familiar with just doing this and why this works? Or should I go over that? Good? Alright, cool. So if I try to console log this, what should we see? Will this work?
Yeah.
It is not working. Why? Yes, we didn't invoke the function. So the point of this structure is we're defining our functions here, but we also need to invoke our functions. And we can invoke it up here because these all get hoisted up, as your lovely presentation has told us. So let's invoke our fetch chores. So now it should hit this part, and we should see our console log. All right, so there's our response. This is just a bunch of internet stuff. So how do we get it into the actual chores that we need? Okay.
So maybe like response. Response JSON.
All right, cool. So let's console log that. Aha. So now we have an array of actual objects. So now that we have this, what do we want to do with each of these objects?
Put them on the page.
But before we put them on a page, we have to like make some browser-friendly div to put them in, right? Also, we have to think about where we're putting them on the page. So we have this index.html file, right? Where do you think is a good place to stick this stuff on the DOM? This is a good place. Yeah. This is our form. This is where we fill out a new form. And here we have a lovely place to put our chores. All right, so if we want to put our chores here, what do we need to do? We do need to create the elements. But what about, don't we have to like attach them here too? Yeah, so we got to grab this thing somehow. So how would we grab this thing?
Select ID.
Yeah, let's try it in the browser. So, document. And what's the syntax for that?
In strings, hashtag
All right, cool. So we got the right thing. We're moving in the right direction. Where do you think is a good place to declare that variable? Where do we need to use it?
Need to use which?
That variable of this thing here, chore list. Like, where's a good place to put this in my code structure?
Either in the create function or outside of it.
So in create a chore?
Yeah.
Create a new function that like deals with adding things and then call it when you fetch it.
We could. That's one way that you can do it is actually create a function that creates a new chore for you every single time, or like creates that div, which would be very useful because every time we fetch the chores, we need to create every single one of those divs. And every time we create a new chore, we need to create one of those divs. So we can do that. But for the matter of like sticking this variable somewhere, I would put it at the top just because multiple functions might be using it. And like as you go through, you can always restructure things as you see fit. So this is like what we're starting off with. And if we run into problems, we can always change it later. So let's call this
Chore list.
chore list. All right, so what do we want to do in here?
Then
Okay, so what do we do with our then? What does this thing give us?
that's our array of 2 objects.
Okay, so what should I name it? What kind of objects?
Chores.
All right, chores. And what do we want to do with all of the chores?
Iterate
Okay, what kind of iterator do you want to use?
for each.
Good idea. And what do we want to do with each chore? All right, so put each chore on the page. And this is where I like Mackenzie's idea about using like a different function that can do this for us. So what should we name it?
Add chore to each.
Sure. Why not? It's very descriptive. Do you think it needs any arguments?
Chore.
Yeah. So this will be the actual object that's coming in, right? All right, very cool. So let's look back to what a chore is supposed to look like. Kind of looks like this, right? It's a div. It's nicely styled for you, right? This might happen on the code challenge. I don't know. No, I really don't know. I'm not like giving you hints. But one thing you could do is like see what things are styled. And we can see that a chore card is styled for us, which implies putting a class name of this. And if we didn't do that, we wouldn't get the nice styling that this page comes with. All right, what else is in this div? And this is a, what kind of element? It's a button. And then we got some kind of heading, we got some kind of paragraph, and we got an input field, right? So we got to recreate a div like this for one chore and do it over and over for every single chore. So how do we create a div? All right, you can create the element.
I prefer inner HTML.
I think
Creating elements.
in this situation, creating the element might be good, but because the element itself has a lot of inner HTML, we can use HTML after we create this element. So we can do like document, create element. Is that the right syntax? So we can create this thing, and then we can add inner HTML to it of all the things we need. And then by doing this, it's very easy to append this to what we need. All right, so what do we want to add to this?
The heading and the button and everything.
Yeah. So this is where inner HTML could come in handy because we have a bunch of elements that we're trying to add. We're adding a button, we're adding a heading, we're adding paragraph text, and input field. All right, what should I start with? Which one appears first? All right, the button.
Can't you just take the HTML from the page?
Well, the thing is, it's not on the page because we're creating each one ourselves.
But then how are those ones already on there? Like, can't you inspect it? I mean,
I can. And you can look at some of this stuff. But this is also from the solution code. So all right, so we got,
sorry, is that cheating or is that
if you're able to do this, do it.
okay? Okay.
I'm not 100% certain if this kind of stuff will appear for you or not.
Okay.
All right, so what do we want to add? Button. What goes in our button? Okay. So we see how that turned out? Okay, so we don't have that yet. Why don't we have it yet?
So we're not calling
Hmm?
it. Oh. Yeah.
So we're making this div. We're giving it a button. But what are we doing with our div?
Appending.
Yeah, that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
We're not doing that yet. So what do I need to do here?
You did that.
So what's the syntax for appending?
Append. Yeah. Can you say append to? I would have that.
So I think the best way is you take the thing that you're trying to append to, and then you do dot append to that, and then you give it the thing that you're appending. So now we're appending this div. So let's see if it works. We need to call this thing. Okay, so for each chore, we're calling add chore to page. Cool. Some stuff is happening, right? We got some X's. That means some of this logic is working. Again. Hmm? So how do I give this a div? A class name. Like this. Nice. Now we're closer to what we're trying to do. What about these? These don't look quite the same.
Button class name.
Yeah, so these buttons do need a class name because our delete button is being styled. So this is a class name for the delete button. Where can I put that?
In your HTML.
Yeah, so I can just add it here.
Sick.
Oh, guys. Getting closer. What other elements do we need?
H3. Is that what it is?
Sure, let's do an H3. And what goes in our H3?
Chore.name. Chore.title.
Is that going to work? Cool. What else do we have? Let's look in our database. What other properties? Mm-hmm.
Priority.
Exactly. So what kind of tag should I put for duration?
Paragraph.
What goes in here? Man, you guys are tired. Go get some tea or something. Alright. Got this. And then, one more thing. What's the other one? And how do I put the stuff in the input field? So, this value?
Love a Calio.
Whoops. Typing is hard. Alright, and what goes here? Nice. So we got all of our chores rendering, right? Okay, very cool. So we basically did this thing, right? Bam, done. What else? What's the next thing we want to work on? All right, let's create a chore. How do we approach our create a chore method?
Post request.
Yes, so we need a post request. Where is like the information coming from to create a chore? Need info off the form. All right, so how should we tackle this?
Form first, post request later.
Okay, so what do we need to do with the form?
Select it. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
All right, should I select it in here?
You could do it at the top. You could do it there.
Okay, we can do it at the top. So how do we grab this form? Okay, we can do that. So you want to do query selector? You guys love query selector.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big proponent of testing, always. Where does this happen? All right, very nice. What do we need to do to this form? Why did we need to grab it? Where do we want to do that? Where do we want to put our event listener?
Anywhere.
Underneath that.
That's a good spot. So let's think about what our event listener is trying to do. It's trying to create a new form, right? So maybe the function that it hits, its callback, can actually be the create a new form function or create a new chore. So how do I make that event listener? And what kind of event are we listening for? All right, and what should it do? What should its second argument be?
Function.
Yeah, let's make it this function, create a chore. All right, so this function can take an argument. With every event listener that we make, it can automatically take the argument of that event. And it can come in handy, especially when we're using forms, because you can get info off of that form, off of that event. So when we write out this function, it can be useful for us to look at the event. We should also just like check that this is being triggered when we hit submit. So I usually just put a console log. You guys know me. So I saw something, but it blinked away in the blink of an eye. How do I fix that? What do we need to do so that it doesn't just refresh right away? All right, cool. So let's do that. How do I do that?
Jinx.
All right, I misspelled it, of course. Nice, nice. It's here. All right. Now what? The event listener works, but it's not really doing anything useful for us at this point. It's not creating a new item. We need this. We're kind of trying to accomplish two things with our create. We're trying to add something to our database, and we're trying to render it on the page. So how do we approach that?
You need to get the values from the form.
Mm-hmm. So which values are we looking for?
Priority duration.
All right. Should I make them into separate variables?
No.
Yeah.
No?
You could.
No,
It
no,
doesn't-
don't. I just don't know how. How do you do it as one?
So if we wanted to make them into separate variables, you can have like title. And how do you grab this thing off the form?
E dot target dot probably value.
Dot value?
No, dot title dot value.
Nice. Yeah, so with this syntax, it's whatever the name property is. So you gotta look in your form, and if it's not set up for you, you can set it up this way so it can make your life easier. And we can do this with the other values that we're looking for. Alright, so we have that. And priority, right? So let's console log these. So I'm gonna put some stuff in here. Feed the cat. 2 minutes. That's duration. Poor cat. So this thing is hitting. Alright, so it's console logging. Very nice. We got all of these. What do we want to do to create that new thing in our database?
Use those as arguments, and you just reuse the other function.
Which one?
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, you could do that, right? Add Chore to page.
We could if we wanted to add it to the page, but we also want to add it to the database. So we do want to do this eventually. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So how do we do that?
Make a post request.
How do we do that?
Fetch post URL.
Yeah, I think I have some stuff up here for fetch.
And then you put the URL. And then it takes a second argument of an object, and then you would just do method.
Mm-hmm. Alright. Which URL do we want?
It's the same, right?
Same one. Exactly, because we're posting. So we're posting to all chores. And what's the second argument going to be?
Content.
Mm-hmm. And what goes in it?
Method. Post.
What else?
Headers.
Headers.
Love headers.
What goes in headers?
Whatever is
Also
there.
an object, and then content type,
Yeah.
application/JSON.
So let's just put this stuff. Cool. And the most important thing,
Body.
and what goes there?
Your data.
So can I just do this?
No, because it has to go on as objects and keys. Am I right? That was a guess.
It'll know to do it like that.
You are right. But also, you can do this.
No, that means I wasn't right.
No. You are right because you have to give it value and keys. You're making an object, right?
Wait. What?
But since they're the same.
But listen. Well, listen, I got you.
Okay.
So we're setting a key title, duration, and priority. And the value is going to be these variables that we defined up here, right?
Mhm.
The cool thing that JavaScript did in ES6, like the latest features, is if you're going to have key value pairs that are the same thing,
Mhm.
it's going to know, oh, hey, I'm making a key called title, and it's setting it to a variable somewhere up my scope. That's the same thing. You can just leave that out, and it works. It's a shortcut.
You will have to pass that in to JSON.stringify.
Yes. Why do we need to do that?
Because reasons.
Because that's how fetch works. It basically needs your object to be something it can read. And it can read JSON, but it can't read a basic object. And that's why we're telling it headers that like, hey, look for JSON. Our body is going to be written in JSON.
Oh, stringify needs an N.
Stringify.
Stringify.
Ah. Strugify. Gotta love that Strugify. Alright, so we're doing all this. Do we want to see the result of this? Let's make it happen. So we'll put some stuff. We got this response. It's giving us status 201, which means created. This is good news. Maybe it's even in our database at this point. Yes, it made it in. What do we want to do next?
Put our other function so it goes in the front end.
But what do we want to do in here? Just call that other function right now?
You want to call .json on the response.
Well, what does that do for us again? What does res.json do for us?
Puts the response into JSON.
Yeah, so it actually gives us a useful object. So this will give us the result. Instead of this internet garbage, if I add a new thing, it's now giving us a useful object. So if we wanted to add it on the page using that method that you mentioned, add chore to page, this method is set up to take an object of a chore.
Right.
So now we have that object back. Because of our promise chain, we used res.json to make it into an object.
Wait, so you couldn't do that before?
You couldn't do it before because it was just like internet stuff before you did res.json.
I thought it was just input values.
This stuff?
Yeah, and then didn't we make it into internet stuff when we did the post request? Like, say you did it, say you wanted to put it in the front end before you did the post request. Could you
Yeah,
not?
I suppose you're right. You could make it into an object.
Yeah.
Alright, well, since we're here, we can just do it this way. So what are we passing it?
Chore.
Yeah, so do we need to do this or is there a shorter way?
You can just leave them out and have the reference.
Yeah, so we can actually take this out. Is everyone comfortable with this syntax?
No, because you're using it different. Now I am.
You're the greatest. Yeah, so this just takes whatever the result was of running this, and it passes it into this function. Alright, moment of truth. Walk the sloth. You gotta put something totally different, right? Because I keep reusing the same stuff. Hi, 5 hours. And there he goes. He started walking.
So when you get the response, also make sure that you only use the exact action that's sort of related. If we did it before, you could get invalid
Sure.
and you post it there.
Yeah, so
That's like a design decision.
if you want to check if that response was valid and if the thing was actually created.
No, I just meant if we added the chore before we put it in the database, like based on the variables we made.
You could. It's called optimistic rendering. Like you're being very optimistic. If you wanted to be like really safe and not do that, you can even check like, is the response status 201? Like, did it get created or not? And then if it did, you can add it to the page. But we're putting in the database first just to make sure that it really worked. I believe in not optimistic rendering, pessimistic rendering.
Now I understand.
Okay, so this stuff all works. On to the delete. How do we approach this one? Like, what do we need to know when we delete?
Where's the
You need to know what thing you're deleting. What thing am I deleting? Alright.
You need an event listener on the delete button.
Okay. We also gotta take off the thing we deleted. So take it off the page and remove from DB. Okay? Okay, cool. So which one should we tackle first? All right, if we do event listener, where should we put that event listener? Where in our code?
Buttons.
We can't just add it to the button because we did the inner HTML.
You can still grab it here,
Oh.
right? Maybe.
Yeah, you could query select the button.
See,
We can do that.
see.
Like,
Why
will-
not?
Will it render like before you? I don't know how this thing works. Like,
I think you can.
cause like I think I had the same problem. I had like a similar problem when I was working on my lab. So like when you're trying to create something and then like grab it using query selector while you're creating it, it doesn't work.
Right.
So-
because-
Functions after it's fine.
yeah. If
One
you do
thing-
it after you append.
One thing I recommend with like delete buttons is adding a data ID property onto your button. So that way the button is actually tied to the ID number of the chore. So that makes it easier to like grab that particular button if you
Is there a
wanted
lab
to.
on this? That-
Maybe, I don't know.
No,
There
there
was
wasn't.
Yeah, can you explain what that is? I don't want. Like,
So
anything
it's
else.
basically like giving it a unique ID. And we call it data ID because it's coming in with some kind of data that's important to this object. But that makes a button unique because it's tied to the particular chore, right?
It, specifically, it's like it's an HTML5 like syntax, and specifically made for pages on information. It's not necessarily important to the
Mm-hmm.
background
Mm-hmm.
It's ID
for whatever.
So how can we add, like, what do we want to give it as a data ID? Do we have access to that?
Yep.
We do. It's wonderful. All right, cool. And then if we wanted to grab the button for that chore, how would we do that? So query selector.
Oh, but that would grab all the delete buttons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are we just trying to grab one right now, or are we trying to grab all of them?
This wouldn't work. Would it? It hasn't been added to the. Or has it?
The query selector has to go after the append, right?
I'm so confused.
I think they both work. There's a cool
guess-
trick I wanted to show you guys. Hang on. I have a cool trick that I want to show you guys if I can find it. There's a cool thing you can do with query selector. So, don't look. This is a cool thing where you can select a specific element and you can give it the tag name that you're looking for. So we're looking for button, and then data ID is the attribute that we have, and then set it equal to a specific thing. So here we're looking for chore ID. So remember, we're adding one specific chore. So we have one chore ID. We're giving it all this inner HTML, giving it the delete button, and then we're grabbing that specific delete button that pertains to that specific chore. So this is some magic that you can do.
Why do you put brackets?
Here,
Yeah.
syntax.
What is that?
Because you're looking for this attribute of this tag,
Okay.
and you're looking for it to match this thing.
Okay.
So let's just see that it works. Gotta set it to a variable. Alright, cool. See, we're grabbing all of these buttons and they all have different ID numbers, so they all pertain to different chores. And this can help us when we're deleting stuff, right? Alright, so now that we've done that, let's add
Before that dependency.
Yeah, now I'm interested.
putting it before this. Let's find out. I'm interested too.
Okay.
Ah, yeah, you're right. You're right, you're right, you're right.
I was second guessing myself and I was like, well, we're creating it on the document, so like maybe it works, but
It's
Yeah.
just like a
Yeah.
string.
Yeah, so you do need to append it first in order for it to be on the DOM, which makes sense. Okay, so now we're adding an event listener to this, right? What event?
Click.
Click. And what callback function?
Our delete function.
Delete chore. Which will pass along the event with us. So what do I want to do here?
I guess you don't have to. It's not form.
Wrong. I want to check if this is connected. Hello? Delete. I want to make sure that this event listener is connected before I do anything else. And it is. Alright, now what do I want to do? We did this. Where's this take? Alright. Now what?
E dot target dot. I don't think you can do that. You did.
Well, you're trying to remove a thing off the DOM, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's think about what thing you're trying to remove. If you do e.target.remove, that's this thing,
okay.
right?
The parent element.
So let's console log some stuff. That's this button, right?
Mhm.
I'm trying to remove the whole thing, so how do I get to that?
The parent element.
Exactly.
Can you do console.dir?
Yeah, so now I have this whole thing. And can I just do remove on it?
Yeah.
Alright, it's gone.
Sick.
But it's
Delete
still
it
here. And if I refresh, it comes back, right? So that is one thing that we do need to do throughout this. But we also need to delete it from the database. So how do we do that? And where are we fetching?
URL.
The URL.
/ID.
Yeah. So this time we need a particular one. Actually, I'll probably need backticks. And how do I get the particular ID?
$sign. Brace.
Where does that ID live?
Event.target.dataset.id.
That data ID?
Dataset.
This?
There's
That's
no.
it. No,
It's just
no.
one word.
This? Let's check it out. Actually, I want to do it before. Nice. I did it a different way. I did something with like get attribute. But that's really cool too. Alright. What do we want to do next?
Let's get out. Sorry.
You want to try it with get
I
attribute?
just want to know what it is.
There's a way that you can get an attribute So if we have this event target, that's our delete button. So we could, I'll comment this out. No, I'll just show you both ways. If you take this DOM element and you do .get attribute on it, you pass it the attribute that you're trying to get, which is data ID, and it'll do the same thing. It'll give you that attribute. As you can see, there's so many different ways to do things in JavaScript. All right.
We need to pass in a second argument.
I'll just put this as ID. What's the second argument? All right, and what goes there?
Method.
Does it need a body? Does it need headers?
It needs headers.
Does it need headers though?
It depends on the API, and I assume it does.
Wait,
So-
why does it depend on the API?
I don't know if it probably does depend on the API. The way I see it, the only time you need headers is when you actually have a body. Because what are the headers doing? They're telling you what content your body is that's coming in. So it's telling you this is going to be in JSON. So with this delete, you don't actually need headers and you don't need body. You're just telling it which ID to delete from your database. And it makes a delete request directly there. All right, then what? Are we done with this one? I think so, actually.
Yeah, because we did the delete.
We did all of the things. So we remove this. And it's gone. Very nice. All right. Delete is done. All right, and then for update, we're just updating the priority of the task. So if I were to change this from important to like low, then it should change it in my database as well. And actually, I want to add a button here. And I've already included a button in my styling. So I want to put this button on our div. Where do we do that?
Where's that? At the top.
Well, where are we making our div?
Oh, okay. So it has to be after that function.
Yeah, so we can put the button here. Button, question mark. And then we can call something like edit. What else do we need?
The class.
Yeah.
Probably under D2.
So now we have this edit button, right? You want to give it an ID?
Yeah.
All right. Just ID? That ID? And then give it what? Okay, this isn't what. Yes, it is what I want. Okay.
Will that get selected in the delete button?
Yeah. So that might be.
Because it's selecting all of them. Right, it's selected.
Can you just move that part of the like the delete button query selector? Can you move that into the delete button function and then change that query selector to the class of delete button?
So put this in the delete button function.
Like leave that query selector there, but instead of having button data ID, that string,
Mhm.
move that string into the delete button function and then make that a class delete button query selector.
I'm confused.
So that
Move
this
this?
is, like, yeah, so that's still query selecting,
Mm-hmm.
and then with that string you move into the delete button function so that it's gonna identify it after the event listener. Like it's gonna identify its data ID. You
I don't
what
know
I'm saying?
because we still need to determine which button we're adding the event listener to.
No, because the event listener is it's gonna go on all the delete buttons, and then once like the event listener happens, then it's gonna say, okay, which of these delete buttons is the event listener?
Oh, are you talking about like event delegation?
Yeah,
So like put the event listener on the entire div?
on all the delete buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do that. You can also put the event listener on the entire div and then just check where the target occurred and if its class name was delete button versus edit button. You can do that. I think for us it would require like some restructuring. So we can actually take a shortcut here, and instead of calling it data ID, why don't we just call it ID in this situation? So then we can just grab the correct button.
Why do we need the correct button? Why can't it just be all the ones and click it and just that target? The specific one?
You can. I think you can do that. So like make an array of all the buttons.
Like query selected all by class name instead of.
Yeah. Thinking that too.
Alright.
No, I'm just wondering. Like,
I think we can. And then you can attach the event listener on every single one of them. I've done stuff like that too. So there's like a lot of different ways to do it in JavaScript.
you just need one event listener.
You need an event listener on everything.
You would still need an event listener on every button, so it would be like an array
Oh,
of
yeah,
all of the
yeah.
buttons, and then you'd have to do a for each.
Right.
Yeah, so let's just stick to our original way. So like the edit button for the div that we're currently creating, and then we can do like get element by ID and pass it the ID that we're giving it here, which is Chore ID. Lots of different things work. And then we can console out it. So now we're seeing all of our edit buttons. And we're getting kind of like the same functionality as the delete button, and we can put an event listener on all of them and point it to our function for editing. So how do we attach our event listener? If I could only spell button.
Leak.
Lister. Listener.
Listen.
Listen. Alright. And what function are we calling? Update chore. Cool. What do we want to do inside here to make sure that this is working?
Patch pass.
Console log to make sure that this event listener is connected. I think it's always a good idea because if you end up with broken code, sometimes you might not know if it's your event listener isn't connected or your code is actually broken. So edit button. So I hit edit. I'm getting this. This is good news. All right. Now what do we want to do? Do we want to pass anything here? What do we want to pass? It's always going to be the event, right? Let's see what this looks like. Could be some useful information. So now we're getting this button. We have an ID on here of the thing that we're trying to edit. We can access the parent div if we wanted to. There's all kinds of stuff that can help us out.
Should we have put the event listener on the div instead?
We could have. We could have done it through event delegation where you attach an event listener to the whole entire div. The event listener will respond no matter where you click on that div, but then you'd have to do like an if inside of your event listener to check if the target was this versus the target was this versus something else, and then if it was something else, you just don't do anything. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can do this. But we've chosen to do it this way, so how do we move from here?
Yeah, this is the same thing that we did before.
Event.parent node, and then you would have to like come back down to the.
Okay, so I want to grab the parent.
Can you not say e.target dot? Oh, okay. I see.
what was it? Parent element? All right.
Parent element or parent node would work.
You can do parent node too.
What's a node?
It's like a
It's like
it's a
a
DOM
DOM
object.
object.
Oh, okay.
All right, cool. What about the ID? Is that gonna come in handy?
You will have to cancel log to see it. I don't think there is going to be data set anymore. I mean,
This one?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right?
Okay. So we can say parent dot value, parent element dot value, the input dot value.
But we gotta get this.
Yeah.
That's the input, right?
Yeah, you can. I think you can. So we're trying to grab the new priority, what we're trying to change it to, right? So we can call it new priority or something like that. So you're saying we can do parent dot input?
Dot value.
Well,
I don't know if you can do
if
it.
you do console.dir on the parent, we can see all the
We can
things
see it.
you can call on the node.
Yeah, I don't think you can do this. Where? What?
Console here is
Instead of console log, console.
I'm so used to. You know, I've never been comfortable with console dir. Please teach me.
And then it shows
Oh,
it
okay,
as a
that's so
node, and
useful.
it'll show you.
Anything useful here we want to call?
We'll probably.
go down.
You might have to go back down through the children or something like that.
There's an easier way. So when we use query selector, we usually do document.query selector on the entire document. Can we just do query selector on our parent and grab input? Yes, we can. Yeah. Today we learned. I figured it out today too, actually. I was really excited. I was like, logically, this makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, so new priority. So we're gonna do query selector. No. So parent dot query selector, and we're looking for input, right? So let's check new priority.
Does that work with like tags and classes?
It works with everything. It's query selector, but just instead of on the whole document, it's on a smaller segment of the document.
I feel like that's a really important thing.
It's super useful, right?
Wait, I feel like
We did.
yeah, it was definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but we did it with
If I click this,
Oh, did we do that?
Flash.
I was like, I definitely.
let's see if clicking this gives me test. Gives me input, which is useful, but I want input what?
Value.
Can you do the inspector on it? And just see what it's called? Like the ID.
If you scroll down to value.
Yeah, there's value on this. There
and
should
then
be.
it's, yeah, test.
Exactly.
It's the-
But then if you were to use like the mouse thing on the inspector, can you see?
This thing?
Yeah. Like. Oh, it's just input.
Input dot value.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm using the parent. I'm query selecting over it for input, and then I can just do dot value off of it. So now this gives me important. This gives me low. So this is the thing that I need. If I change this, it's giving me the new thing, which is super useful because I'm changing it to the new thing, right? So what if I want to grab the old chore and I want to change it? Is there a way I can go into my database and grab the chore that I'm trying to alter?
Fetch again.
You can fetch again, exactly.
Gotcha.
Well, I want to work with the old chore that I have and its properties.
Yeah, you could just go to the specific URL.
Exactly. So this is gonna be fun, guys. I want to teach you guys async await because it's the best thing ever. So we have this, right? We're going to a specific URL. Yeah, we gotta grab the ID off. So how do we do that?
Shouldn't that be the target ID?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure we set it to the ID.
Can you do this? Can you do this? I don't know.
That, no, it's not that idea.
I don't know if
Yeah,
it's locked
because it
out.
has- It's going to be an interesting thing.
I think that'll work.
Well, didn't we set the
Yeah.
ID
Yeah.
to?
Yeah.
Yeah, we set it to the. Okay.
Cat knows things. All right,
That
cool.
makes sense.
So now we're fetching a thing that's a particular ID, right? We're trying to grab our old chore. So let's like double check that it's working. So I want to make sure this is the chore that I'm looking for. There it is. This is the chore that I want. Now, the problem with .then is this is asynchronous. So I can't like do this in order and then have the chore ready for me to use later. I'm like stuck .thenning. With async await, this problem is no more. So what you can do with async await, which I highly encourage you to learn, and we're not like writing all of this code in async await, we've been .thenning, but I do feel the need to sprinkle a small amount. You can put async in front of this function, or in front of any function, and it makes the whole function asynchronous. And then the things inside become synchronous. So then, because one of the problems with .then is there's no way to grab the thing out that you actually want. You just have to do .then, what do I want to do with it after? But with async await, you can actually get the value back. So I can actually save this result into a variable. So I can be like, const old chore equals await. So now I'm like waiting for this to come back, right? So let's take this off for now. What do you think old chore is going to be if I console log it?
It'll be a promise.
It's no longer a promise.
It's no longer a promise. No more.
That's
With
right.
async await, no more. I've waited for this to become a real thing. So what is that real thing going to look like?
An object. Or I guess. Yeah.
So
It's going to look like an internet thing.
old chore?
Yeah.
I'm super
Also,
confused.
I've seen async on like full like scripts.
Yeah. I
Is that a
mean,
thing? Like,
what
I've
do you
seen
mean
it-
by on full scripts?
So when people are linking their like .js files in index.html, I've seen them do like scripts async.
Yes. In
And
fact,
then-
I do that. Can I say something off the record? No, because it's
Is that-
recording.
Is that bad?
I personally don't like that we do this whole DOM content loaded because it's completely unnecessary if you do the async defer. Like if you put defer in your script, it's always going to wait for everything to be loaded, so you don't actually need to do DOM content loaded. Or if you put it on the bottom of everything, you're not going to run into that problem. But this is what we teach, so this is what we want you to use. But it's also good for you to know like different ways to do things. All right, so now we've tricked our thing to be a real object instead of just a promise. We can use this thing, we can edit it, we can maybe change a property on it and pass it along to our patch request. So how do I do that? How do I change the priority on this old chore? And what am I changing it to? New priority. Now, the thing is, and this is where I'm not 100% sure, I don't know if this is like gonna mutate the thing. So maybe just to be safe, we can make a copy. So how would I do that if I wanted to take this old chore and I wanted to make a copy of it into new chore?
Slice.
What's a cool way to do
Nope,
it?
that's an array.
That's for arrays. There's another one.
Slices.
I love it. So we can spread out all of the values of old chore. We can throw in a new value. Which one are we trying to throw in? Or overwrite something that's already there. Hint, hint. So now we've successfully made a copy of our old chore. We've called it new chore. And we've overwritten its priority to what the new priority should be. All right, cool. I think we're ready to do our fetch. How do I do that?
I thought that's what we were already doing. I'm super confused.
So here, we've collected our old chore so that
Why?
we can manipulate it. Because with like put and patch requests,
Yeah.
you usually have to pass in all of the properties. So we wanted to get all of the properties off of it too. I've seen times where like patch works with just putting in the property you want to change, but it's not always the case. And I was doing it this morning and it wouldn't let me change just one property. So I want to give it all the old properties of that object as well.
So you have to do that even though there's the ID there?
What do you mean?
Like, cause like I thought it would just recognize it by the ID, and then like when you do a patch request, and then you don't need to say like this is the old chore, so do this to the old chore.
Well, with the patch request, you're passing in everything you want to change.
Right.
And like you're passing in a body of what you
Right.
want all the things to be, kind of like with the post.
Right.
So if we go up to the post, you see how we pass in key title, duration, and priority.
Yeah.
So we still want to do that
But
with our put or a patch
you're
request.
sending the entire thing, like the entire variable of old chore.
Basically. So I'm gonna send an object like this,
Okay.
and it's gonna have the old properties and the new one that we're trying to change.
Okay.
So, how do we do that?
Fetch.
Yes.
But do you have to do return fetch?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So you're just gonna do the same URL right there.
Exactly. So when do we want to return from functions versus not return from functions?
I always return fetch. I don't know.
So the way I think about it, in JavaScript, like, you do your functions. There's two different kinds of functions in my opinion. There's ones that are like a recipe, where you follow all of the instructions and in the end you end up with a cake or whatever thing you made. You have a result. You're like returning something. But then there's other kinds of functions where it's a set of instructions and it's like cleaning your house. It's like do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And in the end you don't need to return anything and your house ends up being clean. So it's like here you're doing all of these things and you already end up with what you wanted. Like your DOM is changed, your database is changed. What's the point of returning something in this case? So usually returning is when you want to call that function and save its result in a variable and like use it later, but we're not really doing that here.
Alright.
Okay, so back to grabbing a specific thing. This is the thing we're trying to edit, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the second argument?
Objects, method,
An object and method is,
patch.
you can do patch, you can do put. What else?
Headers.
Headers. This is the part that I never memorize because there's so many ways to just find it.
Body.
And finally body. And what are we going to pass to our body?
Old chore.
Exactly. Well, old chore or new chore?
New chore.
New chore. Alright, cool.
We have to change this.
Shall we see if it works?
So why do we do a patch and not a put?
I am personally a big believer in put. I always do put. From my understanding, the functionality is pretty much the same, the way Graham has always explained it. With put, it's like you take a picture off the wall and then you put it back on. And with patch, you just patch the
Yeah,
things that
the difference is patch will take like, I think put takes the whole thing and tries to update it, whereas patch can like update just a
Yeah, so
single
that's
portion
why
of it.
we're doing the whole thing, right?
Well, let's try it. Let's try both ways. Let's see what happens. Because I ran into this problem earlier.
Like,
Maybe things will be different. So with put, this should work. So we're going to change this to low importance. We're going to hit edit. And we're going to see if our database has changed. Low.
Okay, that
Title went
Yes,
away.
nothing
Why?
else.
Because you replaced it with that title.
But it should have taken the title from here.
Did you refresh it?
Undefined.
Why?
Because we only put the priority.
Yeah, but this should have taken all of the old things.
Old chore is just the like.
Oh,
the
yes,
rest-
yes,
we
yes,
didn't
yes, yes, yes,
.json
yes.
that.
Okay, so other cool thing. So with using async await, you can do this kind of thing to promises where now you have a real thing. This returns a promise. .then also returns another promise. So you could add a .then to this too. If you wanted to, you can make it a separate variable and be like const JSON old chore.json. Or you can just chain it like usual. So now we have our res.json. So we still need the real object from the old chore. Because remember before when we console logged old chore, it was just the internet junk? That's because we didn't turn it into JSON. So now, if we hit this, now it's actually the chore that we want.
Oh, I think my earlier question
Yeah?
was like, so for the body, if we put instead of new chore, if we just put new priority and made it a patch request,
Yeah.
would that work?
Let's try. Let's try all of the ways. Because I did try it earlier and it did not work. And I was a little bit confused why. But let's try this. So we're going to change test to high. And let's see if it worked in the database. That worked. Alright, let's try it with patch. Let's try just this way for now, changing everything. So we'll change hey there to important. That works too. Alright, moment of truth. Let's just do the one thing. And where are we getting this from?
Wait, the variable new priority, right?
Yeah, let's just try changing just the one thing.
Oh, okay.
And if this works, then we don't even need to fetch the old chore. It's just this way wasn't working for some reason. It's working. Interesting. Alright, so you don't need to do this, but now you know how to do this. And this is really, really cool, and I encourage you to dig deeper into this. So we've accomplished all of our deliverables. We split things up into functions. We learned async await. That's it. That's all I have for you guys. You don't need to clap. Yep. And I will